Evening. All right, today we're going to show you some Forge Gunny stuff. So we're going to do, this against a very good team. In fact, very good team. They really pushed us back from the get-go. But what we were going to try and do here was really just figure out, really, I think, Forge Gunning a bit more. We don't generally do too much Forge Gunning, only because I think with the change that came in 1.7, Forge Gunning was a little bit crud after that. It's not, actually, and maybe that's the reason I guess I'm doing the videos, because it's actually not that bad. And we'll show you that. So really, we knew that the enemy had, I think, at least 4 tanks at this point, and I think, you know, we're trying to, I think, just start thinning them out. And what I'm using here is a Wirikomi Forge gun, which is a pretty powerful gun. And there is a little trick you can do with this. Some may call it an exploit, but hey, if you use redline railgun tanks, I call that an exploit. You can hop around with it. So you can see there, I'm able to hop around while still charging. So yeah, I don't care if that bothers you. In fact, if that does bother you, ha ha ha. Anyway, this is it's a pretty good Forge gun. I think I do prefer the Ishikone Assault Forge gun personally. I just find that a little better, but it's nice to be able to hold the shots somewhat as well. So there you go. You can see much more accurate, so we can kill this assault dropship. But there we go. Look at that. And yep, I used my little tricky thingamajig to get that kill. I don't care. Don't care. Come at me, CCP. Come at me, bros. And I think certainly with the addition of maybe another gunner, or maybe a swarm launcher or remote explosives, you can effectively do quite a lot of damage. So this is the thing. Forge gunners have always been still quite good, but not a solo Forge gunner is very unlikely to kill a tank. And that's kind of by design. So you see there, we just hit him at the same time, and that effectively did the job. And I think this is something that you have to bear in mind, is if you do want to continue to kill tanks with AV, you've got to do it as a squad. And that's, I mean, I think that's kind of how it should be. I think there should be maybe the ability to slow tanks down, though. I do like the idea of blasting tracks out. So you could maybe use remote explosives to destroy the tracks of a tank. And then it's completely exposed and isolated to the point where your armor can then move upon it. So there's a few things I think they could do to make that a little bit more exciting, I think. But I think Forge Gunning as it stands is pretty good. And Stefan and myself are actually Forge Gunning with the same gun as well. So there's pretty much about 4,500 or so damage leaving these guns if we hit the target at the same time, which is pretty much a tank killer straight off. So there we go, look at that. Vehicle after vehicle being killed, which is glorious. So hopefully this is clear, because I think a lot of the time, I think people, they generally dismiss AV as being underpowered, and I think it's not. Look at what we're doing. Any tank and dropship coming our way, we are wiping out. And we decided to kind of carry the offensive to them a bit more, because they stopped coming around this side of the base. So we thought, you know what, we'll get up on high. So Stefan flew up to the higher L building you see in front of you here. And we continue the damage raining down. Now, again, because of the sort of suit, okay, the Wirikomi gun itself is quite expensive, but these are relatively cheap fits. But look at that, we've got 2 Wirikomis, you know, charging up, firing at relatively succession intervals, and that Madruga is in big trouble. Boom. So, you know, looking at that, AV isn't underpowered. It really isn't. But, you know, what is underpowered is maybe if you're doing it solo. What is also underpowered is if you're doing it maybe incorrectly. A lot of people will, for example, you should time your shots. So, for example, we don't kill this dude, for example, because we didn't time our shots. We should have, but we were a little bit kind of drunk with power at this point. So we kind of got this bit wrong. Plus, with these kind of tactics, you're very open and exposed to orbitals, etc. So, you know, you have to bear that in mind as well. But I would say tanking is still very, very powerful, and I think the problem we still have is that he could call in a railgun tank now and sit there and shoot us from the red line, and he would be out of range of our Forge guns, and he would be also, you know, pretty much able to deliver all the damage he wants onto us, which is really bad. So because that, and that's kind of the issue, is that unfortunately if you give a mechanic to players in a multiplayer online game, they will use it, particularly in CCP's universe that they've created. People unfortunately are just massive dicklords in this kind of scenario, and I think we're no different. Look at us jumping around in our Forge gun. If you give us it, we'll use it. And that's why I think redline railguns need to be removed or changed or whatever, because they need to save us from ourselves, because otherwise people just, I mean, it's a lazy way of playing. What we're noticing a lot lately is people are AFKing in redline railgun tanks, and it's not really AFKing, it's like semi-AFKing. So they're obviously just capping or whatever, and they're not really playing the game. But what they do is they sit on the hill, the mountaintop, and then they just sit and plink away at anything that comes their way. But they will just sit there all match. So sometimes they look idle because they're not really, they could be doing something else, they could be browsing forums, whatever. Every time they take a hit, they just roll back. So it's semi-AFKing almost. And we're seeing a massive prevalence of this. Almost every match there's at least 2 people doing this now, it would appear. And I think this is just the general level of people's interest in the game, is people are bored of this now. And I think they're just literally playing to keep the skill points going for maybe when other stuff comes in, which is a shame in a way, because I think there's so much more to be done in this game than just sitting and redline railgunning. So they used to do it with sniping as well. Sniping with obviously, very easily done because you could just sit way at the back. Very difficult to kill you. And I think there's a way around this, and it's just simply to, if you're in the red line, you appear on the map. So if you want the protection of the red line, firstly, I wouldn't even have a red line, but that's just me. But if you're going to have a red line, then if you're sat in it, all equipment and all people and all vehicles appear on the overview regardless. And I think maybe orbital damage should be 10 times. I think there should be something that pushes you out of it. So while you get the protection that nobody can come at you, there should be a downside to it. This is supposed to be CCP's mantra of design, is everything that's powerful also has a weakness. Yet the red line in this game is all powerful with no weakness, and I think this is kind of stupid. So, red line railgunners like this, he's got all damage mods, he's got pretty shit tank on him, to be honest. And to be honest, it's all just about what can I do and sit in safety of the red line with my damage mods on and kill stuff. And it's pretty sad. And I think this is kind of, we almost need to kind of protect these people from themselves, because if they just do this every match, eventually they'll get bored and they'll realise there's no point doing it, and then they'll leave. Whereas if you give them something more exciting to do, people will actually stay and play the game. And I think that's really quite honestly the difference between all this. So there we go, interesting stuff. And again, I think, particularly, hopefully that's shown you that, AV is quite good. And also when you get sort of into the point where people are just tanking you continually, don't be afraid to bring in your own tank as well. There are people who would just, because it's so cheap, they would just continue tanking no matter what you do. We killed, I think, 4 or 5 tanks in that round, maybe more, in fact, maybe 6 or 7 if I think about it. But what was interesting is they just kept coming. So people deliberately just keep coming at us with tanks. So there has to be more of an incentive not to keep calling those tanks in as well. And quite frankly, once they've lost one tank, they call in a red line railgunner and sit on the red line anyway. And that gets really dull really quickly. There we go. Hope you enjoyed that. I think, again, AVing isn't bad. It's not terrible. I think certainly worth a go. And I think all you need to do is just make sure you've got, a couple of wingmen who are good with you, and you will actually kill quite a lot. Hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.